We're shifting where truth is not found to be clearly distinguished in either the Father or the Son's argument. Instead, we're finding this either-or idea as progressively more and more limiting. This shift is changing the way that we see institutions and other people, and it's affecting how we interact in our relationships to those institutions and to one another. Now, in this very global day and age, we are having to reconcile our own personal experience with those that are presenting very different realities. And the value of the individual in our culture has become increasingly more and more important. Now, there was a time in our not-so-distant history when government and religion, or more specifically, the crown and the cross, as they say, were often working in oppressive tandem. Some might even argue that this is still going on right here in our own backyard. But it was when people had very little control over their fates, and life or death could often be determined by a whim from on high. This was the totalitarianism that Western civilization has been battling for centuries. Governments shrouded in oppression where the individual is not free to choose and is merely a pawn in the regime's agenda. Now, there was a time when government and institutions recognized no limits to their authority and attempted to regulate every aspect of public and private life wherever feasible. And ordinary citizens had no significant share in the decision-making. But our forebears protested, and they fought wars, and they lost their lives to secure our freedom and to justify our autonomy. Now, the interesting thing is that that very same Judeo-Christian heritage that was used by the state to put its citizens in bondage and to claim authority also helped the revolutionaries with its concept that we are all individuals with souls. So when 16th and 17th century thinkers added the concept of individuals actually having the capacity themselves to observe and think and evaluate and choose, when the philosophers added that to the mix, let's just say the war was on. Everything changed. So this was essentially what we call the beginning of the Enlightenment. And it has led to democracy in government, and it has established public education. See, Enlightenment ideas were highly successful in undermining the totalitarian rule of royalty and religion. And those ideas of our capacity to make our own decisions and the value of the individual are still used in that struggle against oppression today. With the Enlightenment, each person was lifted up with powers of observation and reason, and thus an inalienable right to participate in their government. So most of us, because we're part of this nation, are bought in, for the most part, to the implication that as individuals grow in their own knowledge and freedom, so the state grows in its efficacy. So what our goal in essence is, in order to create the best state possible, is an educated populace actively participating in their government. Now that's one way to look at things. There are more cultures in the world than our own. And as the son in that dialogue that I presented to you would be very quick to point out, I'm sure, there are many different views of the world and different views of relationship. And I wonder if we would set as much importance on the conscious choice of the individual without our own religious and philosophical history that we have experienced. See, we can see the benefits of valuing the individual, but I'm wondering if we can also see the consequences. So this morning, I'd like to explore with you a little bit about whether or not we've traded one totalitarianism for another. To look at the consequences of conceiving the autonomous individual as the foundation or the core of our society. So we hold, first and foremost, that each person is endowed with powers of observation and reason. And we know that observation can be wrong because we're fooled all the time. And we know that reason can be wrong too, and can be frustrating, like in the dialogue I showed earlier. But it's not only led to a broader understanding of government by the people and for the people, but it's also transformed religion. This idea of putting the individual first, of giving importance to the individual, has transformed religion. Because see, it was in this country where Unitarianism and Universalism were drastically shaped by the founding principles of this country, creating a religious foundation for this church that values the inherent worth and dignity of every individual and governs our churches by democratic principles. We call our own ministers, and we've created a transparency of religious leadership never seen in any other religious institution. Now, for over 2,000 years, the philosophical debate has raged on, intellectually as well as religiously, theologically, about the value and definition of the individual. What does it mean that I am separate from you? That I am not you, that I'm part of you? So the definition of individual, we're trying to sort out how we come to know the world out there and the world in here. We're set up, actually, from the beginning into this either-or binary system of what is me and what's not me. What is me in the beginning is greatly shaped by those who raise us. What is you in the beginning is greatly shaped by those who raise you, those who care for us. And also, what is us in the beginning is subject to a given set of circumstances, our own chemistry and biology and our family. But in the beginning, we are unable to care for ourselves, unable to make choices. As time goes on, we develop from the garden in which we are planted a conscience, a will, a personality, and our own unique experience of the world. And look around. We have a really beautiful collection of unique and different perspectives on the world, even right here in this room. But it is when we deem our own experience of the world as the only valid experience of the world that we find ourselves participating in what I'm calling a new totalitarianism. When we make decisions for ourselves as though we exist in a vacuum, not considering the complexity of the relationships of those to whom we are connected, then we are participating in the new totalitarianism.